Hello students, this is Mrs. Moore, and I am bringing you a last minute third lecture, and this is going to be on the Declaration of Independence. I had sent a video out today that apparently had no sound. I looked at it. I didn't know what was going on, why there wasn't sound. I tried to fix it, but I definitely want to give you the assignment that you need to have. I want to give you the information you need to have. So again, I'm using my document camera, and it makes everything I do look kind of slow motion and strange. Try not to be distracted by that. It's hard for me not to be distracted by that, I must admit. So should we complain more about technology and the way technology never does exactly what we want it to do? We could complain all day about that, but let's just press on to our lecture. This is going to be a lecture about the Declaration of Independence itself and how it is structured. And so our overarching question is going to be, how do you announce to the world that you're breaking up with a king? Let's just say that's our overarching question, all right? And those of you who may have your pocket Declaration Constitution on hand, that could be useful to look at because we are going to go through it systematically. It may be a little bit tedious for some of you to go through this, but it's definitely worth doing, and it is a pretty short document, so bear with me. You have your assignment to fill things in as we go, and again, the beauty of this is you can listen to it as many times as you need. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So basically, the way the Declaration of Independence is organized, because it is a document, it isn't some mythical symbol of liberty. It is a real document. It has three parts. It's organized into, first, the preamble, and second, it's going to be a list of grievances against the king, and third, it is going to be basically the closing, where the different men who have signed it make it personal, frankly. So let's begin with the preamble. Preamble basically is an introduction. It's going to basically state all of the theoretical ideas, the philosophy behind declaring independence. It's going to be where they reject the notion of a king and say why they're doing this, where rights come from, why they have the right to do this. And so let's go ahead and look at this together in our pocket declaration, page 35 if you have yours with you. So again, this says the Declaration of Independence, the action of the Second Continental Congress, July 4th, 1776. This is the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. And remember, with the story that I shared with you in the last lecture, not every state was in agreement. Some states were holding out, thinking it over, and they consciously did not be a part of this voting because they wanted it to look unanimous. And consider why. You know, the reason that is because it's much more powerful if you can say we all feel this way. Plus, you don't want to let your enemy know your weakness, that you have people who are wavering. All right, so when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And you all will remember that you've memorized this, of course. Now, it's a long sentence and quite a few things are said in it. So, basically, initially, it's saying that it will sometimes become necessary for people who are connected politically to break off that relationship, to snip that band that connects them. And that's what this document is going to be about. And that nature and nature's God, and again, this is a way for the founding fathers in a country that's established in part on religious freedom and religious toleration to speak to people who are religious and people who are not, but that we are endowed by nature with the ability to make our own government. We have that power in the same way that any other person does. So we are going to make our own government, and a decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that we tell why we're doing this. So we're going to announce this to the world, and we're going to explain why. It's not just, dear King George III, I'm leaving. There's going to be reasons why. Okay? All right. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So let's talk about that. There are some obvious, self-evident truths that we're going to agree with. This is basically, it's like they're building this, the founders, and Jefferson in particular, they're building a foundation on which our entire government is going to be established. And that's the idea that our Creator gives us rights that we cannot give away. They are our own rights. And among these rights, and it's not listing them all, but there are many: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. So we have the right to our own life. And that is interesting because we'll see later in Supreme Court cases, can you commit suicide? Things like that. You have the right to your own freedom. You have the right to pursue your happiness. And again, we'll see later that my sphere of freedom can't interfere with your sphere of freedom. And that's what the Supreme Court is going to have to figure out later. You know, what does freedom mean exactly? Whose happiness? How does this work? Okay? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the just consent of the governed. And so, that is the purpose of government, to protect rights of individuals. And the way that the government is able to do this is through the consent, the permission of the governed. And you may say, well, I don't remember some specific moment, or my parents don't remember a specific moment where they said, yes, government, I agree that you may protect me. That's not how this works. Basically, every time you vote, you're giving your consent of the governed. Okay. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Okay, so think about this, that if a certain form of government in fact keeps people from their lives, their liberty, and pursuing their happiness, that the people then have the right to change or get rid of that government. And here we know that the colonists tried to get their rights from the king. They said, let us have the same rights as members of parliament, or let us have representation in parliament. Let us have a voice, let us be represented. But they were told no, and so they couldn't alter the way that they were represented in government. They had to abolish this government. And again, then it's their responsibility to make a new government that will protect those rights. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Now this is a big deal. Prudence, maybe you've been told to be more prudent in life. Forethought, thinking clearly, not being rash in your actions. And so what Jefferson and what these other representatives are saying is that we are thinking, we have been thinking ahead here. We are not getting rid of this government for a light and easy reason. We are not saying we don't like this government because they won't give every man a horse, or because they won't let us make purple the official color of the government and we all wear purple on Tuesdays. No, they're saying that people will be very careful about this because it takes a lot of work to change the government, and lives are usually lost. Accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So it's human nature that people will take something as long as they can take it. And when they can't take it anymore, then they're going to go ahead, get rid of their government, and try to make a new one. So this is supposed to be proof that we've tried to hang in there as best we can. This is supposed to be proof of that, okay? But when a long train of usurpations and abuses, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right and their duty to throw off such a government. So when we have seen that our rights are being abused and taken away, our authority over our lives is being taken away, that in order to put us under a tyrant's heel. So I've drawn that image for you in class before of a tyrant's heel crushing the people. And that's the situation the colonists are saying that they are in right now. And so it is our right to get rid of a government like that and to provide new guards for our future security. So it is a right all people have to not be oppressed, and if they are, to get rid of oppression and to make some kind of new government to protect their rights. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. So, hey, we're talking about our own situation here. We have been oppressed like a tyrant. We have tried to work it out. We have taken as much as we can take. We can take no more. And so now we are going to alter the system of government we live under. We live under, allegedly, a monarchy, but it's become a tyranny. We're going to make a change. The history, and it's going to get personal now, the history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Okay, so now we're going to turn to, this is not just theoretical. This is about these colonies and this king. And so he has done these things. He has injured us. He has usurped our authority. So that's like undermining authority, taking away the powers God has given us and nature has given us that we can't give away except through our consent, and our consent has not been justly given. We have no representation in Parliament. And so now we're going to get to the second part of the structure of the Declaration, submitting facts to a candid world. So we are going to tell you the truth. The world is honest, candid. They are to be our judge. We're not hiding anything we're doing. We are being, what's the word people like to use in business a lot? Transparent. No secrecy here. Okay? So, the second part of the Declaration. This is King George III, he has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. So he won't let us have good laws. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. So he won't let his governors do things for our benefit. And when he removes laws or removes our authority, he then ignores us. He neglects us. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. So here, only a tyrant, Jefferson and the founding fathers are saying, only a tyrant would refuse to allow the colonists to have representation in Parliament, to have a voice in laws that are made that affect their lives. But this is the case. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. So the king plays games, they're saying. He purposely makes things difficult for the colonists so that they can't even see to their own rights being secured. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, and we know about this, the dissolution of assemblies. For opposing, and why has he done it? Because we have opposed with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. So I like to think this is the equivalent to taking your ball and going home. You won't play the way the king wants you to play. He's going home. When all the colonists were doing was demanding what is justly theirs with strength, courage, fortitude. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby, okay, so here this is kind of a long paragraph, but basically, when the king doesn't allow us to have a voice in our governments, when he leaves a vacuum there where nothing is happening, this is an invitation to anarchy and tyranny. So we need to have some kind of government, and it's not the government the king is creating for us. Let's see. Okay, a couple of these are rather obscure. I'm just going to kind of ease over them. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing to assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. So he won't let us interpret our own laws, carry out justice in our own ways. He has made judges dependent upon his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. So we talked about this. We talked about this with different rules and laws that the king and the parliament had passed, where the authority, at some point, leaders had to be dependent upon the colonists because they ruled at the colonists' pleasure. They were appointed by them. Their salary was dependent upon the colonists' will. And now they're saying the king has taken that away. So now these leaders do only what he says. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. So the king is creating a bureaucracy dependent upon him. And a bureaucracy is basically a group of people that get paid by the government that don't do a whole heck of a lot. And it's a sweet deal. And they're all working for the king. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without consent of our legislatures. So we've talked about the danger of a standing army and how a standing army, that is, it's basically going to be the king's thugs. And think about the quartering of troops that has taken place in Boston and how intimidating that has been for the colonists. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. And again, that is a problem of a standing army, particularly in a colonial situation where the army doesn't listen at all to the colonists or any colonial authority, but instead listens to an authority across an ocean. That is tyranny. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from the punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. So if anything is done illegally or wrong by these soldiers, they're not even being brought to justice. It's a mock kind of justice. Cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. We understand that from the Navigation Acts. For opposing taxes on us without our consent, taxation without representation. For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of a trial by jury. All right? And so we understand that, remember some of these juries that were going to try those colonists who were going against the Navigation Acts. They were going to be a jury made up of the British. Again, where will their bias be? Where will their loyalty be? All right. Let's see. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries, so as to render it at once an example and a fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rules into these colonies. That's the Quebec Act, guys. So you've put a fake puppet government in Quebec, and remember, brought the Quebec boundary south, taking over land so that the British Empire can thus be enlarged and controlled. See? Okay. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. Remember that benevolent neglect that the British have developed in relation to the colonies, it's partly the result of centuries of things happening in Britain domestically that took their attention away from the colonies. Meanwhile, the colonies developed their own culture, laws, tradition, government, and the king is trying to remove all of that now. Let's see. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Now he's waging war against us and has been. He's plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, destroyed the lives of our people. He at this time is transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun, with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. Ooh, these are fighting words, and they're vivid too. So you even have the image. Imagine to yourself Jefferson with his feather pen writing this in a Starbucks. Just kidding. Are you listening? In a Starbucks. And at the time, just imagine a British ship full of angry Germans, you know, with their fat pockets because they've been paid to fight for the British. And they're drinking out of tankards. They're angry, coming across the seas because old King George, he is gonna burn some stuff, kill some colonists, be barbaric, twisting his evil mustache. I don't think he even has an evil mustache. But this is a vivid image that is being painted, right? That this is hiring mercenaries to fight your own people is not worthy of the head of a civilized nation. This isn't what civilized people do. And realize George has rejected the olive branch petition as well, making him look further uncivilized. Here we go, going on. Let's see, he has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. So this sounds like taking prisoners. Let's see, do I need to push a button here? Okay, there. Sounds like taking prisoners to fight on behalf of the British, the colonists themselves. He has excited domestic insurrections among us. Think of the Loyalists. An insurrection, again, is a rebellion. He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So now he's accusing George of enlisting the natives to help and citing how barbarous the natives are in their methods of fighting. So think of scalping, things of that nature. It's terrifying. They're creating kind of a frightening document here, right? In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress, so to fix the situation, in the most humble terms. Our repeated petition have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Ooh, imagine how angry George would be reading that. You're a tyrant, a prince. Someday you all will read Machiavelli's The Prince and you'll know what a diss that is. Though if you want to be a prince, it's like, heh, you bet I'm a prince. I know how to control people. But he's unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of their attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We've told the British government that we are here for religious freedom. We are here because we wanted to be free of you and your way of doing things and your corrupt monarchs and your bloody religious wars. We've reminded you of that. We've appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. So we've tried to remind them, hey, we descend from a common people. Stop oppressing us. We speak the same language. We have a similar heritage. Come on, the same heritage, in fact. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. So we have been emotionally appropriate and just in our appeals, and they have not listened. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. So, this is a pretty profound statement as well. We are having to give in to this separation. It's not what we colonists want to do. We look forward to your friendship in times of peace, but war is coming. We therefore, now here's where it gets personal again, that these specific men signing the declaration, they're the we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, that's God, for the rectitude of our intentions. So we are saying this before the world, before God. God knows our hearts, our intentions here. We do, in the name and authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Okay, so we are saying that we are independent, we are free. It is right that we are cutting the political band there between us and Great Britain. That's exactly what we're doing. And as free and independent states, we, they meaning the colonists, have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. So that's a laundry list of what free states can do. Make war, make peace, make alliances, friendships with other countries, establish trade, find ways to get that money, and do all other acts and things, okay? And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, again, said in such a way as to not hurt the conscience of any who think of God in different ways, right? Because religious freedom and toleration. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So these men signing, it's about their lives. They'll be hung as traitors if they lose. Their fortunes, think about this. They're going to be putting aside their work and waging war, and they could lose everything they have in the process, and their honor. So as a gentleman, they want to be thought of as honest, and they're saying, this is my word, and that's worth more than money, your character, right? Okay, I know this has been kind of tedious to go through, but I hope you found it interesting as well, and it should help you thoroughly answer these questions. I'm going to sign off now and hope there's sound. If there isn't, you may never hear from me again because I'll be living in a cave, crying, cursing technology to anyone who walks by, right? Okay, until next time, I wish you a toodaloo and a happy weekend.